Hi everyone, welcome to Difference Frames the World, a permanently demonetized channel to see the world from a different angle. Even though we have been demonetized since December 2021, we have kept the channel alive despite long-lasting difficulties. We are sorry that we cannot upload videos daily as before. A weekly update is the best we can do. Nearly 1,000 patrons and supporters have helped DFTW in the past 400 days. Among them are Leo, HK Wong, Sherry, and many others we cannot thank individually. Today's topic is the approaching conflict between NATO and Russia, which might start World War III shortly. The United States and Germany recently agreed to send their battle tanks to Ukraine, which claim 321 heavy tanks from the West would arrive soon. There will be more battle tanks from some European countries, like Poland, Spain, and Norway, which have also been allowed to transfer many German-made tanks to Ukraine. After receiving the above-mentioned heavy tanks, Ukraine will also send requests to the West for more advanced weapons, including fighter jets and long-range missiles. On January 28, 2023, at local time, Mikhailo Podolyak, a senior advisor to the Ukrainian president, said Kyiv and its allies are accelerating talks on Ukraine's request for long-range missiles, but details have yet to be disclosed. History repeats itself, but compared with the battle in Kyiv 82 years before, German tanks would appear in Kyiv to help Ukraine fight Russia, instead of occupying the former Soviet Union's central city, where nearly 700,000 Soviet soldiers became captives in 1941. Germany's victory in Kyiv at that time was very costly, as Hitler lost the last chance to conquer Moscow. 8 decades have passed, and Germany's tanks will face Russians in Ukraine again. Ironically, Germany's bald leader confirmed on January 25, 2023, that Germany would not send its tanks to Ukraine when journalists cornered him. It turned out that he was either a liar or knew nothing about what was going on in his country. Germany's foreign minister, Annalena Baerbock, was more straightforward and called on Western allies to unite. "We are fighting a war against Russia, and not against each other," she spoke at the Council of Europe in Strasbourg for the cohesion of the Western allies. After Baerbock's statements, the Foreign Office in Berlin clarified that Germany was not a party to the conflict. With Germany's tank deliveries to Ukraine being decided, people can hardly believe Annalena Baerbock's war comments were merely an unfortunate slip of the tongue. She speaks English well, and the language she used to deliver the speech was not an excuse for such a diplomatic mistake. She also claimed neutrality was not an option. Moscow was angry with Germany's tank deliveries, but the German foreign minister's warmongering remarks did help Russia unite the Russian people for a possible conflict with NATO countries. A NATO senior military official said the Western military bloc led by the United States is ready for a confrontation with Russia. Ukraine and Western countries have recently agreed to discuss more weapon supplies, including long-range missiles and warplanes. In a recent interview with Portugal's RTP TV channel, the chair of the NATO Military Committee, Rob Bauer, replied to a question, and he asserted, "We are ready." Still, the NATO high-rank official stressed the precondition of such a dangerous scenario, saying that only when Russia crosses the red line by invading one of NATO member states will NATO respond. Russia has also been preparing for such a confrontation. According to TASS, in November 2022, Russian Education Minister Sergei Kravtsov said, "Many volunteers are not combat ready, and from September 2023, primary military training courses will become mandatory in Russian secondary schools." At the end of 2022, the Russian Ministry of Education has completed the teaching plan for the military course, which will be implemented after approval. According to a report by the British Ministry of Defence, the mandatory military training in Russia includes learning to use AK assault rifles and grenades, simulated military exercises, the use of military protective gear, and the acquisition of first aid skills in the field. In addition, Sergei Kravtsov revealed that the mandatory military training course would teach students how to defend against chemical attacks and deal with nuclear war. The Russian Ministry of Science and Higher Education has also planned to launch a military training program to improve participants' military literacy and skills, specifically for Russian university students. Russian military courses can improve the efficiency of military mobilization and allow students to acquire more skills as they approach the recruitment age. Russian Deputy Defense Minister Valery Gerasimov proposed to the Ministry of Education that students in the 10th and 11th grades of secondary schools should receive military training for 140 hours. He stressed, "If we want peace, we must be ready for war." It has been almost a year since the Ukraine war broke out, and Russian President Putin has not completed his special military action. The war has even escalated to a regional war that might involve NATO directly. Russia recently declared some military progress on the battlefield after experiencing several setbacks. According to TASS, Russian forces have controlled the Blagodatnoy settlement near Soledar of eastern Ukraine, a hard-earned victory for Moscow. The price was too high for Russia, though. After American and German battle tanks appear in Ukraine, Russians might face more difficulties. Ukraine will be more painful if the war drags on. It will be challenging for Kiev to recruit more soldiers when more and more casualties are reported from the battlefield. The country is trying to fill non-combat positions with ladies to get more males to fight Russian forces. The West constantly accuses Russia of invading Ukraine, and now NATO will send tanks and possibly fighters and long-range missiles to Kiev. No one can rule out the possibility that NATO will openly send its troops to help Ukraine fight Russia, although NATO is reluctant to do so for fear of another world war in Europe. The doomsday clock shows it is now only 90 seconds to midnight. The Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists at the University of Chicago formally proposed the doomsday clock concept, a fictitious clock face. The designer fixed the hands at 23:53 at the beginning, symbolizing that humans were only 7 minutes away from the end of the world, midnight. The closer the pointer is to zero, the greater the danger the human race faces. Since its establishment, the clock has been adjusted 21 times. The last adjustment shows the humanity is only 90 seconds away from destruction, meaning the human race on Earth is currently experiencing an unprecedented crisis. According to the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, the main reason for the clock to be adjusted forward by 10 seconds mainly includes three aspects: the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, the global climate crisis, and the uncontrolled spread of the new coronavirus. Rachel Bronson, the woman behind the doomsday clock, says the doomsday clock's time reflects the reality that we live in a time of unprecedented danger, only 90 seconds to midnight, and experts do not take this decision lightly. Rachel Bronson also pointed out that the U.S. government, its NATO allies, and Ukraine have multiple channels of dialogue, and relevant leaders should do their best to explore these channels to turn back time. It is not easy to turn back the pointers, unfortunately. In previous videos, we have repeatedly mentioned that NATO's eastward expansion threatens Russia's national security. If Ukraine still pursues NATO membership, the war can hardly end. Former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, who used to be firmly opposed to Ukraine's NATO membership, has changed his stance on Ukraine, saying its NATO membership might be an appropriate outcome of the Ukraine war. 2 weeks ago, on January 17, 2023, speaking at the World Economic Forum's annual meeting in Davos, Switzerland, Kissinger said, "Before this war, I was opposed to membership of Ukraine in NATO because I feared that it would start exactly the process that we have seen now." He stressed that the idea of a neutral Ukraine under these conditions is no longer meaningful. Kissinger commented that a diplomatic process could help Russia reevaluate its historic position, which was an amalgam of an attraction to the culture of Europe and a fear of domination by Europe. He also said that Ukraine should regain the territory annexed by Russia, but it should also hold negotiations to end the war as soon as possible. Kissinger's shift in viewing the Ukraine crisis reveals the situation is now a deadlock for Russia and Ukraine. Russia's greed for land will not allow Moscow to give up those annexed Ukraine states, while Ukraine is unwilling to abandon those lands captured by Russia, including Crimea. The First and Second World Wars originated in Europe. If there were a third one, it might also be in Europe. World War II ended 78 years ago, in 1945, and the Third World War should have happened if people were not afraid of mutual destruction. Suppose the West keeps pressing Russia with sanctions and providing military aid to Kiev. In that case, the war will drag on and eventually escalate to a higher level. We do not think Russia will use its over 6,000 nuclear warheads shortly. Still, if it cannot win a conventional war with Ukraine supported by NATO and feels its national safety is in danger, it will not hesitate anymore. Russian President Vladimir Putin said a nuclear war would mean a global disaster for humanity and the entire world. He mentioned that the US invented the first atomic bomb, and Russia needed nuclear weapons to protect itself. However, Putin added, "Why would we want a world without Russia? The Third World War will be a nuclear war and will not last long, after which people will only be able to fight with fists, stones and clubs if any could survive it." At the end of the video, we extend our great thanks again to supporters and patrons who have incessantly helped us keep DFTW alive through Patreon, PayPal, WeChat, Buy Me a Coffee, and GoFundMe. Because of their generosity and kindness, DFTW never gives up and gives in.